Welcome to the official first episode of Details at 11 Media Podcast, sponsored by the SERO Project and Viiv Healthcare. Today we get into the real stories behind the headlines, the laws, and the stigma that shapes how people living with HIV are treated. Today my guest is Jeremy Merrithew, a Michigander whose conviction under Michigan's outdated HIV disclosure laws tells a much bigger story. HIV is not a crime. HIV is a public health concern, just like COVID, herpes, or any other virus spread from person to person. Yet laws rooted in stigma from the 1980s continue to criminalize people living with HIV based on fear, not science. Today we'll talk about Jeremy's story, how these laws harm all of us, and what change could look like here in Michigan and across the country. Well, hello, Mr. Jeremy. Welcome.
Hey, how are you doing today, Lawrence?
Good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here on Details at 11 Media Podcast. We've talked to you a couple of times before. We appreciate you, again, just sharing your story and being bold enough to talk about what happened to you and be an advocate for change. So thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Jeremy, let's jump into it today. For people who may not know your story, may you please walk us through what led to your conviction and what Michigan's HIV disclosure laws required at that time?
In 1988, Michigan's Act 490 made HIV non-disclosure a felony, up to 4 years in prison, even without intent or transmission. Born from 1980's fear, it broke public health principles by punishing over preventing, ignoring science, and fueling stigma.
Okay, to answer your question, I'm going to start with the second part first and talk about the laws and what led up to the laws being written as they were back in the 80s. So what happened was that the first cases of HIV were reported in 1981, but at that time they didn't know what the virus was. So they called it gay-related immune disorder because it was popping up within the gay communities in New York and San Francisco and places like that.
That was what they called GRID, right?
Yes, GRID.
GRID, right.
Gay-related immune disorder, yes. Mm-hmm. But the virus was actually discovered, I think, in 1983. But these laws, like in 1988, President Reagan, his commission did their first report on the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV. Mm-hmm. And basically, they didn't know what to do with it at that time. And it was a public health concern because people were getting diseases that they shouldn't be getting in their 20s and 30s. Mm. So the Michigan law was based on that report, because in order to get funding to treat people on HIV, now they had to basically make us all criminals because we're transmitting the virus to each other.
Wow.
So the Michigan law, how it was written in 1988, basically criminalized non-disclosure for any sexual penetration into the vaginal or anal opening of another person, however slight that may be. So that could be a finger, that could be a nose, that could be a toy. Okay. So that was the law that I was convicted of in 2013.
In 1988, Michigan passed its HIV criminal law during the height of the AIDS crisis, shaped by federal pressure and fear. Guided by the Reagan administration's Presidential Commission and looming Ryan White CARE Act funding rules, Michigan made it a felony for people who were living with HIV to have sex without disclosure, even if no HIV was transmitted, no intent to harm, and precautions were used.
And to answer the question how I got involved in it, I think it was just circumstances, to be honest. It was just how the situation played out and where him and I were at that time. He reported me, and I was in a mentality of fighting the conviction because that's our right here in this country.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so, as we have talked before, Mr. Jeremy, many people will zero in on the fact that, at that time in 2013, you did not disclose your status. And for a lot of people living with HIV, I can definitely attest to this. There are moments where you just want to connect without having the entire interaction about your diagnosis or about your HIV status, especially when you're already in care, as you were at that time. So can you please share with us what was going through your mind at that time?
There was a lot of things going through my mind at that time, Lawrence.
Right,
I do have a substance use disorder, and I was using hardcore drugs at that time, particularly meth, because that's very popular within our community, unfortunately, and that's just how the story went.
right,
Was that I was high and I was just testing boundaries, is basically what happened. So to answer the question about being in treatment and not wanting your whole thing to be based on an HIV status, this is my answer to that. We all have our reasons why we're not sexually attracted to people. And I've had these conversations with people online, and their whole thoughts are basically, why take the risk? Why take the risk? But they're willing to take the risk, as my case exemplifies, that all it takes for someone to have unprotected sex with another person is asking them if they're positive and them answering, no, I don't have that virus. That's what was really going through my mind at that time. But,
absolutely.
and it's just, I went, okay, to talk a little bit about my own diagnosis. I was diagnosed with AIDS in 2007, and
Okay,
here I am in 2025. I have undetectable viral load, which means I cannot transmit the virus to another person sexually. And it also means that my immune system is healthy now compared to what it was back in 2007. And if I was able to get on treatment before I had that diagnosis, my immune system, my CD4 count and stuff would be much higher than what it is now. And the CD4 are basically the helper T cells. That's what the HIV uses to replicate itself and basically destroy. Well, it doesn't destroy the whole immune system. It just destroys those helper cells so when you get a different type of infection, it's going to be harder for you to fight it off. But I am pretty healthy. I go every 6 months and get labs and stuff, and I've been undetectable, less than 0 now. It's what they're measuring it down to. So no, we don't want the whole thing to be about our HIV status, but we also have to take into consideration that some people just might not be attracted to us. It might be the virus or it might be something else, because we can be really catty when it comes to people we get involved with. And I'll leave it at that.
absolutely. And I would like to add in that it takes away from the responsibility of the HIV negative person to also disclose their sexual history. It is not just the responsibility of the person living with HIV to disclose, their
Well,
status and their sexual history.
right, but how the law was written at that time, my lawyer was challenging the constitutionality of the law. I think there was probably
Right,
better ways he could have did that. But how the judge was at that time, he just viewed that this is how the law was written, and he had to interpret the law as it was.
right.
And
Absolutely.
so that's just how it happened. And yeah, it does take away the responsibility. In my case, they basically said, they made it all look like I was trying to purposely infect him so he can infect his wife, infect their baby and everything else, because,
Wow.
that's the type of stuff you learn about people. And
Right.
it's not new to me. I mean, it's not like I haven't been with bisexual people before or bisexual men, I should say, before I was, knew I was HIV positive. But it's a different story when you actually know. And it's not like we want to go out and transmit the virus to other people. That's not what we're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Unfortunately, some people really do believe that, that is a remnant of people that are out here. And I mean, there may be, but it's not typically the general consensus of people living with HIV that we're just trying to
Right. The
pass
media and
HIV
stuff
to
always
everyone.
wants to. Oh, there I go interrupting people while they talk. I
Oh,
apologize.
you're good. Go ahead. Go ahead. You cool.
But the media likes to portray us as demons, that you better lock up all those HIV positive people because that's the only way you're going to control the virus, is locking them all up and putting them on an island or just executing them. Why not?
Right.
I mean, that's how I feel that some people view this thing, because they don't want to take personal accountability for their own sexual health.
That is, yes. Amen. So that leads me to our next question, Mr. Jeremy. Michigan's HIV laws have been called outdated and harmful, as we've discussed, even creating what some advocates call, and I've learned this being a part of SERO Project, who is one of our sponsors for Details at 11 Media Podcast, But they create what some call a viral underclass. Now, Mr. Jeremy, how have you seen that play out, and why is it a danger to everyone and not just people living with HIV, having a viral underclass?
Okay, well, I've been researching these laws, and in 2018, they did amend the 1988 law. And what they did is they stopped criminalizing any penetration, however slight. They stopped criminalizing oral sex in any form. So, I mean, so if someone goes down on you and you don't disclose your status, you're not going to be going to jail for it anymore.
Okay.
So, but what they did do was they also put in protections for people who do have an undetectable viral load, like myself and like many other people who have access to treatment. So the viral underclass is those people who do not have an undetectable viral load. And we got to kind of define what an undetectable viral load is. That's the amount of the virus that is detected in the blood. In the studies that they did less than 200 copies of the virus. That was the partner study, and that was other subsequent studies that came out after that. So medically, it depends on where you're getting treated, but like when I was first diagnosed in 2007, undetectable viral load was less than 50. And I started having less than 50 like in early 2008, or maybe even earlier than that. I just wasn't paying that close attention. But the thing is that there are people who do not have access to treatment. We have a federal government right now that wants to, basically they have a HIV denialist as the human health secretary, Mr. Kennedy, we will call him, because what he is saying is that, oh, we don't know that HIV causes AIDS. We don't know this. Those people exist too. And they contacted me during my criminalization in 2013. And I watched their movie, I think it was called House of Cards. And basically they want to deny all the research that's been done since the 1980s. I mean, all the research that's basically keeping us alive today, they want to deny that this is what's going on.
And what's the name of that movie again?
I think it's House of Cards. I could be wrong. It's something of that nature. But it's about HIV denialism. Basically, they do not believe that HIV is the virus that causes AIDS. Me being someone who was diagnosed with AIDS thinks it's a bunch of bullshit.
Malarkey, exactly.
So,
wow.
I mean, there's a lot going on, and I don't even know if I answered your question now. So
you did. You definitely did. Yeah, like the viral underclass is definitely ignoring people who may have situations where they are unable to become, U equals you in the same amount of time as someone who has access to care. They may live in a city where they have a lot of resources to get around, and in some places where they don't. Or, I think fear a lot of times too, the fear of coming out, letting people know that, hey, I have HIV and I got it through having sex with a guy, and I am a guy, and no one knows that I'm gay. So that too can lead to people not getting into care and creating that viral underclass.
Well, technically, Lawrence, there's laws in the Michigan legislature, that are on the books that we could be criminalized potentially for the sex that we have. And they're not going to go after Miss Susie Christian, who's, having anal sex with her husband. No, they're going to go after the gay guys. So there's so much to this. And since we're talking about SERO being a sponsor, we're talking about the viral underclass, but the viral underclass are those people who are just not connected to care because they don't know where to get the care, or they might be like me, like back in the early 2000s, and just be complete denial about getting tested and going in for it, and stuff like that. So we can't, and they want to take away our funding. We can't negate the possibility that we're all at risk of losing this because of what's happening in the federal government right now. There's a lot of stuff. I don't want to be Debbie Downer about it, but we can't be saying that, oh, these people are using drugs, they need to be locked up. Yeah, they probably do need to be locked up to a certain extent, but we can't just be criminalizing things because this virus is a systemic result of systemic racism, of systemic homophobia, systemic transmisia, which is transphobia for those who don't know what transmisia is, where they are going after all of us who are openly gay or openly HIV positive. They don't care who we are. They just see a bunch of numbers that we cost them a lot of money for insurance, or we cost them this and cost them that. But you know something, the president's known to have extramarital affairs where he's paying these high dollar call girls over $10,000 just for one date. So I mean, even the president himself could potentially have HIV the for doing what he's been doing. But they don't talk about things like that, and we would never know if he did because he wouldn't tell us if he did or if he didn't. And they're not going after people like that. They're going after black and brown people, black indigenous people of color. Right now, they're starting to lock up Latinos. They could be, you know, because they're demonizing Latinos migrating to this country. So therefore, they're going to demonize the Latinos who have been living in this country long before any white settler stepped foot into this country. So we have to think about this type of stuff. And it's just the way life is. And I honestly don't know how to fight all this stuff because I honestly don't know how to fight something that's been here since before we were even born.
Well, I think that your voice and you speaking up is a start.
Right.
You know, you've educated me about a couple of things just in this conversation here, and I've talked to you several times. And, you know, so I think that, you know, educating our community is definitely a step in the right direction. We've learned that from SERO as well. You know, that educating the community is a part of our advocacy in HINAC. HIV is not a crime advocacy and ending the HIV epidemic. So I think off to a great start, and it's raining.
And we also have to don't forget Elizabeth Taylor, because she did have create the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation, and I am a Council of Justice leader with the foundation. And all I really know about her is that she was an actor, you know, and she went through some tough times, and she knew gay people because a lot of, like, you know, gay celebrities back in the 80s started to die of AIDS related complications. And I can name Mr. Brady from the Brady Bunch, or we can name Rock Hudson. And things like that. I mean, this was all in the news back then. I remember watching it on the three TV channels I used to get back then. You know, they tried to warn us, you know, that this was out there, but they did it with all scare tactics.
Absolutely.
That's how the media portrays it, anyways. I'm not saying Elizabeth Taylor. I mean, this is her legacy of doing something beyond the acting.
Right.
Is to end AIDS, not in just the United States, but across the world. And the SERO project is worldwide now, too. So,
absolutely. I know you probably never thought, you know, that you would be talking to people about your story like this on, you know, platforms. And like, how does that make you feel, honestly? Like, how do you feel about that?
It depends on the day, to be honest.
Okay.
Because there is a part of me that wants to just be like everybody else and just live a normal life, which I am to the best of my ability. You know, after spending 5 years in the joint, you know, with people who were actual murderers and stuff and rapists and everything else. So, and perpetual, like, criminals, because they just get caught up in the hype, you know, of the criminal lifestyle. And a lot of them are fathers, you know, too. So, and women in prison are mothers. So we can't negate that fact that this virus goes beyond just locking people up. It affects families.
You know, I know how it is, like, when you have your diagnosis, and then that's a whole life-changing experience right there. I can only imagine having this experience coupled with that. Like, was that also of that magnitude to be as life-changing for you?
Well, a part of me knew I would be somehow involved in changing the Michigan law, and I was a small part of that. There are other people who did speak out about what happened to them under the old HIV law here in Michigan. So, but the issue I think we're having right now is we do need to frame this as something other than an LGBTQ issue, because it goes beyond our community. It affects all types of different people, as you know, because we met those type of people at HINAC.
Absolutely. How has this affected your family or your friends? I know you and your mom have a, you know, a really close relationship. Has this affected you all, like where you are, where you live, you know, where you go out just to enjoy yourselves? Like, has this affected you since
It
then,
affects
since
me on
2013?
It affects me because I'm kind of scared of moving out of this county where I found myself safe in the past few years.
Oh, wow.
Because I know if I do go out into a different community, it might affect my life differently. But I have to move on just like everybody else has. And I have made, meeting Robert and others from SERO has grounded me that we do have the power. We just have to educate people and get others on board with our mission, which is to end AIDS.
Yes. Robert is amazing.
And we have to do that in a way where we're not criminalizing people for being positive and making an error in judgment, because it's not like we're all time going out, not disclosing our status, but it does happen because it's just how life rolls sometimes.
That's true. That's true.
I mean,
So,
sometimes people don't even want to know our names, so why should I have to tell them my HIV status when they don't even want to know what my first name is? So,
that is so true. That is so true, baby. All right, Mr. Jeremy. Well, you've turned your experience into advocacy. What changes do you want to see in Michigan law, and what's your message to others here in Michigan and across the United States who may be afraid to speak out or even get tested?
well, something like, since politics usually becomes like a red or blue type thing with the independents somewhere in between, I want to mention that the great Republic of Texas was the first state to reform their, well, they took it off HIV specific laws off the books. That doesn't mean people aren't going to be criminalized. That just means they don't have that added stigma when someone goes into the courtroom. Yeah, when they find out about your status, they might charge you with something like attempted murder, or some of the things that people have been, I've seen in the headlines. It's just prosecutors will use whatever's at their disposal to put someone, lock them up, because those are just numbers. Where our system of policing people in this country does stem from the southern states, from how they police black people who ran off from the plantation. So I don't see it any different than how we criminalize people than what they were doing in 1896 or 1876 or whatever, because
Wow.
they're just locking people up. And as the president has exemplified, they're not locking up the white rich people. They're locking up people who don't have that type of money to keep on fighting, keep on fighting, keep on fighting, and just and they are using scare tactics to lock people up. And it's just a number so that they can tell the taxpayers that they're reducing crime, when crime just continually perpetuates itself because it's a systemic issue. And they're not doing anything to stop the systemic issues because people don't want to concern themselves with things that don't involve them. That's my take on how people act with advocacy. Maybe I'm not answering your question again.
You did, Mr. Jeremy. You did. You answered it and then some, and then some. Is there anything that you would like to leave with the audience, with your fellow Michiganders, with your fellow people living with HIV, to our allies? Is there anything you would like to say that you would like to leave us with? Take your time.
It's time to wake up, Michiganders, and it's time to wake up the United States of America, because the way things are going, we are losing our super status power within the world. So there are a lot of things we do need to take care of here in this country, but we can't negate our fellow brothers across these borders, whether it's Canada or whether it's Mexico or deeper south into Latin America or South America. We can't negate what's going on, because we've been funding wars since I was born. So there's a lot of trauma that's gone on as a society since I was born, and this predates us. So we got to wake up to what's really going on, and that involves shutting off sometimes the media devices, and especially the TV, because they're not informing us the way we want to be informed. They are just telling us a story to cause us panic when we go to the voting booth. And midterm elections are next year, so this is a perfect time to become involved in fighting something that will have a greater impact beyond our family and ourselves.
All right, Mr. Jeremy. Well, thank you for your final thoughtful, encouraging words. All right, Mr. Jeremy. Well, again, I want to thank you for your openness and for shedding light on what's really at stake when it comes to HIV criminalization. Stories like yours remind us that the fight for HIV justice is also a fight for truth, science, and dignity. For more conversations like this, follow Details at 11 Media on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, HIV is not a crime. It's a public health concern. And together, we can end HIV stigma and HIV. Make today great. Peace.